the episode that never ended. The late night rerun. It started with a simple nostalgia trip. Mark had always leveled cartoons, the ones that aired late at night when the world felt quieter, almost dreamlike. One evening, while flipping through channels, he landed on Cartoon Network. And there it was, one of his childhood favorites. The show had been off the air for years, but somehow here it was, playing like nothing had changed. The colors, the voices, the laughter. He couldn't look away. Something about it felt off. The animation was too smooth. The characters' movements were too fluid, almost unnatural. The voices were slightly distorted, like they had been re-recorded just a little too many times, but it was late. Maybe he was just tired. Then he checked the time, 1:48 a.m. He'd been watching for nearly 2 hours, and yet, the episode hadn't ended. The first warning. Mark frowned. He had seen this episode before. He remembered the plot, the jokes, the scenes, but it just kept going. The story should have wrapped up by now, but instead the characters just kept talking. They weren't saying anything important, just small talk, repeating lines, looking at the screen too often. Then, the main character paused mid-sentence, turned his head and stared, not at the other characters, at Mark, like he knew he was watching. Mark felt a chill crawl up his spine. The character tilted his head slightly, as if listening. Then, in a flat, quiet voice, he said, "Why do you want to leave?" Mark's breath caught in his throat. He grabbed the remote and changed the channel. The screen flickered, and the same episode was playing. The characters were still staring at him, still waiting, still smiling. And hush 3, the TV won't turn off. Mark pressed the power button. Nothing. He unplugged the TV from the wall. The screen stayed on. The same episode, the same unblinking eyes. His heart pounded. He backed away, his mind racing. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe this was some kind of glitch. But then, the main character blinked. A slow, deliberate motion. His pupils shifted downward, looking at Mark's hands, at the remote. Then, softly, he whispered, "You don't have to go." Mark threw the remote. The screen glitched, distorting into a mess of colors and static. For a moment, it almost looked like a reflection. Not of his living room, not of himself, but of something else standing behind him. Watching, waiting. Mark spun around. Nothing was there. But the moment he looked away from the screen, he heard footsteps. The episode that watched back. Mark grabbed his phone, hands shaking. He snapped a photo of the TV screen. Then he looked at it, and his blood ran cold. In the photo, there was someone sitting on his couch. Not him. Something else. A dark, blurry shape with a face that was almost familiar. Almost. Mark turned back to the TV. The characters were closer now, not where they had been before, not in the same scene. They had moved, and now they were all staring. Their smiles were wider. Their eyes were darker. And then, the main character stepped forward, crossing the boundary between animation and something else. "Stay with us." The screen flickered, and suddenly Mark wasn't in his living room anymore. The missing person report. The next day, Mark's apartment was empty. His TV still on, still playing that same episode, looping, waiting. No one ever found him. But sometimes late at night, if you turn on Cartoon Network, if you stumble upon a rerun of an episode that shouldn't exist, look closely at the background characters, at the crowds in the distance, at the ones who don't blink, because some of them, they weren't there before, and one of them might just be Mark.